TopLobsta Productions.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern-day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is TopLobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, a little reminder. Sometime around the half an hour mark, we're going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up there, continue enjoying this live stream, engaging in the live chat, gaining access to episodes before the general public, before the pores, and also early access to Bohemian Grove tickets. We are talking about it, which is work.
It's coming together.
It's coming together. Also, a discount code off of merchandise from TopLobsta.com. Can we not? We don't have to do the shirt that I'm wearing, but let's pull it up on the screen if we can. We would do that. Binaural Beatdown. Ooh, and the Miami MK Ultra Dolphins. Very
Why
nice.
not? Why
Very
not?
nice.
Go buy your favorite shirt from there.
It's disrespectfully matched to your sneakers.
I mean, whatever. We're at a weird turning point in the United States. We might as well match our clothes to our shirts
as the
to
ship
our
sinks.
shoes. As the ship sinks.
As the ship sinks.
Let's
Guys,
get into the guest. This is disrespectful.
Yes, we are joined today by Alex of the Cost of Glory. Alex, thank you for joining us today. Before we get into the conversation, let's show off this website. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that you do, what it is that you focus on.
Yeah, great to be here with you, gentlemen. I'm a former academic. I was a professor of ancient Greek and Roman history and philosophy, and I quit my tenure track job in 2020 to, escape what everybody can kind of guess I was trying to escape. And now I am a guy on the internet and a podcaster. I have the Cost of Glory podcast where basically I'm trying to showcase some of the greatest leaders from Rome and from Greece in their biographies, kind of in Technicolor. But the object of the Cost of Glory is to kind of get people to maybe not fall in love with Julius Caesar, but at least appreciate who he really was, and people around him like Pompey and Cicero, but also famous Greeks like Pericles, and there's a biography collection. I said I was like a historian of Rome and Greece and a student of philosophy. Well, there's this ancient philosopher Plutarch who I'm following, who basically thought that biography was the best way to kind of become a great man. Like, you study biography, you study their lives, and it's not just about kind of being great in magnitude, but also about being good too. So that was like his angle on how you can, like, become your true self. So I think it's a really cool idea, and I'm trying to kind of recreate that for people today who may have no point of reference for ancient Greece and Rome, and try to make it accessible. And I do some other programs around this. Like, we have a little online rhetoric school, and we do retreats in Rome and in Greece in a couple of weeks. Actually, we're going. So we're interested in those kind of like, and for men too, in particular, we do like men's only stuff, which I think is really hard to find these days. And that's one of the reasons I thought it was important.
Well, it is really important. And you're talking about strong leaders, and you're talking about you leaving academia, right? And
yeah, the men only part really does resonate with you leaving academia, because from some previous studies that I saw, like I think women are way more likely to graduate from college. They do much better all throughout school. It seems like a program that's aimed at them and has ignored men. But I have a question about what do you mean by you do a retreat about rhetoric with men? What does that entail?
Yeah, well, so rhetoric is, it's got a kind of a bad name these days. That's just a bunch of rhetoric, and here's the rhetoric of this political party. But it's the Greek word is rhetoric. It means the speaker's art. And it was this kind of discipline that was developed first in the great democratic cities of ancient Greece, especially Athens, where public speaking was the quintessential skill for success in life, especially in the public arena. Persuading assemblies and courtrooms, and it wasn't just about kind of like developing confidence as a speaker and persuading people. It also grew into this whole art of like developing your character for public life too, and so it's a discipline that also encompasses the study of history, because a lot of what you do in a great political speech then as now is to draw on great historical examples and inspire people with them. And you have to kind of build that data bank. And so what we think is really lacking, my friends and I, in education, is this like emphasis on becoming a public man through cultivating the ability to speak in front of crowds. And so we go and we see some sites in the morning, for example, and then in the afternoon we just like have debates and impromptu speeches and study some of the techniques by which you can persuade, analyze an occasional speech, have like Jeffersonian dinner kind of experiences where we just like enjoy male camaraderie, but in a serious vein, where we're kind of like standing up and making arguments and debating things of interest. And it's kind of like fun, but also self-development at the same time. And I think that's one of the things that we've lost. We used to have institutions like this. Toastmasters went co-ed in the 70s. Toastmasters used to be like super cool and I don't know, like a fraternity almost. But I mean, if you go now, that's not the vibe at my local Toastmasters. I mean, it's useful, but it's not the same thing. And so,
well, you could see
recreate that.
There is a huge need for this, and you could see people trying to fill that void, but you get weird stuff like those.
Somebody just mentioned the men in the river holding each other, like
where they grab each other and they scream in each other's faces, and then they sob and they embrace each other, and it's like it's really strange. It's almost like this masochistic kind of a thing where you're paying a dude to scream in your face and then belittle you, and then you have an emotional breakdown with
what Alex seems to be talking about here with biographies are learning about the different archetypes of men and how to embody them. And these guys, it's all over the place. People are embodying female archetypes. The male archetype is already kind of fractured in the minds of most young people, where they don't really know what it is. They'll say toxic masculinity, and it's like, no, that's like it's an exaggeration or a caricature of.
But then those caricatures do rise. You get like an Andrew Tate who has like some redeemable qualities, but then he's also telling you have sex with a harem of women. The Lamborghini is the most important thing. He's not got a family that he's raising or anything like that. It's just this like really cartoonized version of masculinity.
I think it's important what you're going to tell us probably today. Can we go through the common archetypes that were in ancient Greece from the actual philosophers that we probably should be drawing some inspiration from?
Yeah, great question. Well, a lot of one of the great archetypes is Achilles. He's this great warrior. It's a mythological figure. Fair. He's depicted in Homer's Iliad. Maybe he existed. I like to believe that some Achilles or somebody like him existed. He's this kind of super fighter, the best man on the battlefield, and he strives.
He's half man, half god as well.
Half
correct?
man, half god. As Homer tells the story, sometimes he seems like a man, sometimes he seems like more than a man. But he's mortal too. So he has the choice at Troy, and kind of throughout his life, it's like prophesied that he has the choice to either live a life of peaceful obscurity, a long, prosperous life back in his home country. And he actually thinks about leaving the battle at some point. He gets insulted by Agamemnon, the kind of leader of the Greeks at Troy. And he's like, screw you guys, I'm going home. I'm going to go live my long, happy life with, wealth and hot women. But the other side of the choice for him is to have a short life, but everlasting glory. And he eventually chooses the everlasting glory route, and famously he gets shot in the heel by Paris later. This is after the narration of the Iliad, but that's what happens to Achilles. And so that's one of these paradigms of like, flaming out in this grand inferno of excellence, for the sake of maybe a higher goal, or maybe it's on behalf of the Greeks, maybe it's kind of on behalf of your own reputation. So that's like one paradigm. Another kind of contrasting paradigm that is the other hero of the other poem attributed to Homer, the Odyssey. Odysseus is also a fighter at Troy. He's also one of the great warriors, but he's not as good as Achilles, and he doesn't pretend to be. But he's really good at persuasion. He's really good at kind of mastering trickery, sometimes deceit. He's really like good politically wise in counsel. He's the guy who comes up with the idea for the Trojan horse, to defeat the Trojans not by brute force, but by kind of stratagem. And he's also a kind of family man in a way that Achilles has a son, but Odysseus, right? He's left this happy life on his island of Ithaca, way off on the other side of Greece. And he tries to get home after the Battle of Troy and the Trojan War. Takes him 10 years. He meets all these monsters and strange people. All of his crew die. He finally gets home 10 years after the Trojan War ends. So he's been away for 20 years. And his wife has been there kind of fending off these suitors, and kind of trying to stay faithful to Odysseus. And all these men are around her saying, hey, baby, he's dead. Pick a winner, and she kind of keeps them at bay. And meanwhile, Odysseus's son Telemachus is, he was an infant when Odysseus left, so they don't know each other, his son, and so he comes back and he kind of clears the suitors out of his house and reclaims what is his. And it's a kind of he's a model of like how, okay, dying in battle and glory is a good thing, but also like founding a legacy that's going to live on generation to generation to reclaim what you built. I think Odysseus is kind of a hero of like building this society around a great household. So these are like two options in life that I think are equally valid and maybe suited to different times and different characters. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You just, it's Achilles or bust. Sometimes there's no great war to fight and you build a legacy. And there's many more archetypes, like the philosopher archetype, embodied by a guy like Socrates, questioning the kind of corrupt values of his society, rejecting the whole game, the kind of roulette table of honors that seems to promote people up to high office that don't deserve it and don't really know any better how to run a state than your average Joe on the street, and kind of getting ridiculed and eventually murdered or executed by your own people for that reason. And one could spin off many examples, but I think that one of the big takeaways that people, the classics used to be this foundation piece of education in the West, in America as well as Britain. And I got a little bit of classics when I was younger, but I kind of got to college and I felt like I realized that I knew nothing of what people were supposed to know 100 years ago. Somehow I discovered this. What I think it gave you is this library of examples to choose from, of like manly excellence, various forms of manly excellence. Yeah, scaffoldings that you could kind of pick your path. And I think we've lost that, and we're kind of grasping at straws now. And this is why you get these weird, scream into a pillow, sweat lodge, men's retreat experiences. Like, what is masculinity? And ask a psychology professor what masculinity is, and maybe they'll come up with something, but it's not grounded in this deep historical experience. And so I think that's one of the reasons
it's amorphous. It's like this floating thing. It's interesting to me that you should be studying these male archetypes and then at the same time remove yourself from academia because of a thing that I think is only allowed to propagate when you remove strong male archetypes. In other words, the very thing that's rotting academia from the inside out right now, and we've been watching this for a while, is a thing that exists and couldn't exist without you creating this idea of toxic masculinity, without you shaming men for being men pretty effectively for the better part of almost 2 decades now. Maybe, I guess technically you could trace it back. It starts before that.
There's been a long march.
It's been a long march. And now this thing that you have, escaped is it's leaving academia. It's entered the real world, and it's affecting average people at their jobs and at their dinner tables. What exactly was the straw that broke the camel's back? What were you seeing before you left?
Well, I had a kind of personal experience and then a general experience, and I'll start with maybe I'll start with the personal. So I was involved in a kind of educational startup that some buddies of mine in grad school started. We were running tours in Greece and like retreats that in Greece, also in Rome. I was more involved on the Greek angle, but long story short, essentially there was we had all these talented young students coming to us. We had these talented grad students, but it was like a mixed gender environment. And at some point there was like this core tiny intransigent minority of like hardcore leftists that were on staff. Like, it's just hard to do anything in academia without involving hardcore leftists. And they started to resent the leadership of this startup, and who were all men, white men, right? Of course.
And is that the premise for their resentment? Is this male aspect?
They said other things, and they eventually got, they kind of assembled this list of grievances that had, the typical thing, white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, but it was just like normal dudes trying to hold a business together, and like, so untalented people would not get promoted. Things like that.
There's a concept.
There's a
and so but I think that those accusations were kind of an excuse that was really about this resentment of like kind of male friendship and like strong leadership, and also this kind of ideological programming that you get from basically K through 12 and a lot of even public schools. Some of these kids were kind of cushy private school educated, at the typical kind of white leftist profile in the Ivy League environment. And there was eventually like an open letter published, decrying all of the crimes of the institute. And we were involved with a lot of the top classics programs in the US and in the UK too. And, they were sending students to us in the summers. It was great. And everybody liked us. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, these people we had no idea. These people are horrible, horrible racists. And,
there it
and
goes.
white supremacists. Look, they're all white males. There's not equal representation. And so there was a cancellation. And I didn't suffer from it like it heavily, but one of my friends was the co-founder, and he eventually got like forced out of this institution that he spent 10 years building. It made me so mad. And this was kind of late teens, so peak woke before the resistance started, and so that was kind of my personal experience of seeing the character of a lot of the most respected prominent classicists, experts in Greece and Rome, and the gatekeepers, these Ivy League professors, writing op-eds in the New York Times, these kind of people. And
Can I ask you, does
people suck? So
does the group still exist?
So it does, yeah. And
what's its form now?
It's called the Paideia Institute. It's still worth going to, if they run tours. I think it's struggled to kind of recover from this. But there were two co-founders. One of them was a conservative Catholic, and that was, why he became the kind of Girardian scapegoat, the focal point of all the ire, because he was kind of an unapologetic conservative. And then the other guy was a sort of New York kind of center-left liberal guy, and who has since been pushed, like, as he says, I was a liberal that got mugged by reality. And so he eventually is kind of pulling himself to the right. I shouldn't say that too out loud, because he tries to be kind of conciliatory. But so it still exists, but it's, it doesn't have the cachet that I think it used to. Hope my friend will forgive me for saying that. I think he knows that it just did a lot of damage. And now I think a lot of the professors, after suddenly woke is like not cool, or it's, it's questionable, a lot of people are like apologizing to him and for how it all went. So I don't know. I just, the whole thing gave me this impression of like a lack of character among elite academics, and this maybe ties into the general objection that I had, which was, I just felt like there was no leadership in the discipline. And the classics is this used to be this grand, super prestigious, like Greek and Latin are really hard to learn. There are high standards. Not everybody can make the cut. You got to work hard, and very meritocratic, and very culturally influential. I mean, look at all the sword and sandal movies, Spartacus, Ben-Hur. That kind of comes from this tradition of people knowing stuff about Greece and Rome, and knowing what the great stories were. And like we've lost so much of that. Discipline has shrunk so much that, budgets are getting cut, people are getting fired, programs are getting terminated, and all the people with these cushy jobs in the Ivy League schools are like, oh, what our real problem is colonialism, white supremacy, and it's like your discipline is not going to exist, and you are basically. I felt like I was on a ship where the captains were, drilling holes in the bottom of the boat and getting drunk and saying, well, it's good if the ship sinks because it's a bad ship. So I don't know. It seemed futile to me.
Has there, through your studies, has there been any kind of similar point in Roman history where people have done this to themselves on purpose?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think that that modern leftism is really a novel phenomenon. There's a right and left in Roman politics, but like the left wing of Roman politics is Julius Caesar. It's like very manly, soldierly. It's like populists. It's like tough guys, tough soldiers versus, squishy aristocrats who are, sitting on their laurels. And that's just not how it's almost the opposite today. So yeah, I'd have to think hard about, but there are, there's patterns of resentment for sure. In Roman history and in Greek history, you see the kind of like sort of left-wing resentment, the kind of hatred of greatness, or the hatred of the powerful, always throughout history. This is like a universal phenomenon. Envy is what the Greeks called it. Phthonos is this emotion that makes people want to just like not follow the great, but hate them because they're powerful, and suspect that, oh, if they got up in that position, they must have bribed somebody. They must not deserve it. And it's just really toxic to a culture when you get those kind of divides.
Because it's a reductionist point of view, right? You didn't get there because of hard work and discipline and good ideas. You got there because you are a member of an exclusive white male patriarchy that only promotes from within. And if you're outside of the club, then you can't get in. And what that does is it diminishes any great achievement. And then when you look back in history and you see anything that resembles that, then all of the history that built the very country that allows you all the things that you have was built off of exclusivity to a white patriarchy group, right? And so it has no merit, despite how much the fruits of the tree that it is have been good. None of it has any merit, and all of it should be torn down. But that's the thing too, is flawed argument, but it gets even more flawed when they go, and what should it be replaced with? And there is no real idea about what it should be replaced with. The idea is kind of just like diversity.
I think there's an idea. They have a clear idea of what they want to replace with. They just won't necessarily say it out loud, because
I don't think they have the idea. Like these average, the people, like, let's say, I've been arguing on Facebook for a couple of days with people. They have no idea.
The rank and file have no idea, but the thought leaders do.
Yes.
They're like the people that are the professors within the college understand exactly what they want. I don't know if they're so explicit with the general population. They might be with their students.
Yeah, their cohorts, right? In private sessions when they're speaking about where, they ultimately want this to go. And they'll say it in jest. And we're seeing a lot of that now. It's manifesting as actual violence on the world stage.
I mean, it's manifesting as, I think what a lot of them have said and what they've promoted has manifested as a celebration of what happened last week.
Yeah.
You see people kind of like laughing, smiling, and it's like, oh,
which is the normal.
Been talking about this for a while.
It's the exact thing that you would expect to get from something that has its roots in just disdain.
Well,
if you have disdain for the white male patriarchy, then obviously you will celebrate when the thing that you disdain is murdered in grotesque fashion on the world stage.
Would you say that that's the embodiment of Achilles, but on this like weird, perverse left wing side? Because they are seeking glory through, it's almost like war, whereas now the people on the right are still trying to embody, I guess, the Odysseus side, where let's engage in debate. Let's have this conversation. How can we organize a structured society? And I'm struggling right now to see, I'm struggling to determine which way is the right way, or does one lead to another?
Yeah, no, I do think that a lot of the left-wing leaders now kind of fantasize about, murals of them painted on brick walls of like Che Guevara-esque, man of the people. Yes.
Part of the
yes,
resistance.
Civil rights hero. Yes. And, but I don't know. I kind of would go with Dave on this. I think that there is a real lack of vision fundamentally. And there's just not a hopeful future. You see the kind of center left people saying, we need to get back to abundance. And, there's this recent book about this, and I don't know that I don't think that they're really willing to lean into building a future enough to have that vision, because to build any ambitious vision, you need stuff like hierarchy and merit and structure and patriarchy, what they would call patriarchy. So yeah, I think that and one of the other things that they've done to kind of hamstring any attempt at building a better society is to make people kind of allergic to history. Like that's the practical outcome of this, as you put it. It's logically incoherent, the idea that the entire foundations of society are built on this evil, racist patriarchy.
And therefore, there's no reason to look at it and learn from it, because all you're learning from is monsters.
Exactly, and that's precisely the thing that you need to do to build an ambitious future. You need to study the past, and not just study it for lessons, but like to get inspired by it. This is the kind of paradox of studying history, and what I would call the classical spirit. You look back into the past and you find these examples of men whose achievements still echo hundreds of years later. And you're like, all right, how can we do things that will echo hundreds of years later? Well, you don't really get that kind of expanded imagination if like year one is 1967. It's just really,
and it's fascinating because it actually shows itself in the physical, in our architecture, where like we actually can't build anything. Yeah, our McDonald's, which is now just a gray cube with some wood paneling.
Distinctive, at least. Yeah.
And I would love to talk about, the architectural implications, because I think that that's huge. I think there's something to the psyche when you look around and you see these beautiful, inspirational things and you want to achieve for higher. But I also want to say that it's fascinating to me that we have made a relatively cushy society, and we've now allowed people to have such a disdain for the white male patriarchy to the extent that they're willing to remove it, not just statues, not just history, but also by way of violence. But these same people, because of the comforts of society have zero relationship with violence. You're talking about leaders and warriors, and we are being cast aside by the disgusting. I mean, honestly, that's what it really is in so many fashions. It is morbidly individuals who have never been in close proximity to violence, wishing violence upon others, and are even willing to engage in it. And I think that is what happens when you don't have a healthy relationship with violence, when you don't really know what it is, when your violence comes from the media, when you see it in your movies, when you see it in your shows, when the 90-pound blonde white chick does a backflip and kicks the crap out of a dude in an action film, and you go, that doesn't even make sense, that can't happen. It actually lulls, it hypnotizes these morons into a false understanding of the realities of violence. And so they're willing to advocate for it, they're willing to engage in it, you know, to some degree. And I guess there's just not been very many rude awakenings. It's just very bizarre to me to watch this phenomenon. I've been a martial artist for a long time, and as somebody who has an intimate relationship with violence, I don't engage in it in real life because the implications are pretty well understood.
It's horrific.
It's horrific. Exactly. It's actually terrible when you watch somebody's head bounce off the concrete and they start seizing, and you go, "Oh no, a human life is in jeopardy now." But these people don't have that, and they are glorifying it, they're calling for it, and when it happens, they celebrate it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to frame it. And to me, as horrific as the events of the last week have been, with the assassination, which affected me very deeply. You know, the one bright light on this, besides the fact that I feel this is galvanizing a lot of good people, serious people, and making a lot of people kind of center left say, what the hell, what party am I, who are these people? You know, that the left wing right now, they've totally lost the kind of spirited, strong young men. And example after example in history shows, I mean, even in the 1960s, the spirited kind of manly young men are the revolutionary element. Like, if you want to actually achieve some kind of dramatic change and like have a fighting chance at some kind of inner turmoil, you have to have those people. And that's precisely the people that the left have been pushing away for years. And there's just not a lot of like vigor. It's kind of a Potemkin village. It's like a paper tiger now. And so, you know, I think that we're still going to see these probably sadly more kind of random acts of, you know, leftist inspired violence. And I hope this is the last time, but it's like a dying animal clawing out, lashing out without a lot of like real effectiveness.
I want to say this, and then go ahead.
When the animal's at its most dangerous, it's like it's in a corner. The idea of
it's injured.
The ideology. I mean, this is also if you really want.
Now we're gonna have to get off of YouTube.
Yeah, let's get off of YouTube.
And before we do though, I do want to say on that topic, it's very strange to me that they don't have the wherewithal to realize that the trained individuals, the armed individuals, and the actual people who are capable of physical combat almost exclusively exist on the right.
Well, there was a great meme going around of like it's like this really, it's like soy jack face, but his face like resembles a demon.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's, you know, like a kind of like the version of this soy jack. And in the demon side, it says this is the right wing version of like rebellion. It's like, I'm going to debate you and destroy your I'm going to destroy your entire foundation. And then the other kind of like you're looking soy jack has a gun and it says like, I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a difference here. And I'm a little bit worried that the right, if they decide to cross that Rubicon of
violence,
of actual violence, like that can get nasty. Like. And also, do they have to? Because the battle is almost already won. That's the reason why.
I think it's Masvidal Askren. You know, it kicks off and it's a knee to the forehead and the whole thing's over instantly. I think that's what they would find out. Anyway, before we do this, guys, if you want to continue watching this, patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad is where we're going. Otherwise, just give it about a week and it'll release for free on YouTube, etc. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Alex? This idea that these people are poking and prodding the side that actually is, if there were any remnants of strong leaders and masculine men, they exist on the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the rights. There's a post by Curtis Yarvin on this recently that you have to distinguish between violence and force, and the left's version of force is kind of grassroots political violence. The right's version of force is law and order. And I think that the response to Kirk has kind of shown, like, contrast the Floyd riots in 2020, that we're not seeing massive eruptions of violent mobs, but like calls for action. I mean, you can only call for action without seeing results for so long before people start to get like, oh, nothing's going on, we got to do something. But I don't know, I think that's the response that people generally want on the right, like some kind of legitimate, maybe not military crackdown, but like a legal reckoning. And so it's a kind of a difference in mindset.
Let me ask you this:
we want order reestablished.
That this is going to be on the responsibility of the Trump administration to do something, and not necessarily physically drastic like you're saying, but there has to be a response, because you're right. These people, they crave order. Like this, I think something that Jordan Peterson really nails, the distinction between order and chaos. And the right wing, the masculine, the true masculine is order. It's that firm hand of like when you grab your child and you're like, we're not doing that, versus what I think the feminine thinks the masculine response should be. You see this a lot with lesbians who have like the highest violence rate against each other, or women who are embodying this masculine tone, just teachers, people like that, where they'll overdo it and they'll cross that line into what they think is supposed to be masculine, and it just turns out to be nasty violence, like it's like a mask coming off, like a demon underneath. That's not what masculinity is. But yeah, there has to be a strong response from the Trump administration, which they have not had as of yet, but it's been a couple of days. You have to satiate your side to keep them calm, because if not, I don't know where this is going to go. It can get real nasty.
Well, this is a conspiracy show, and so you're talking about order and chaos. What about the idea of order out of chaos, right? You have historical precedent. The Bolsheviks creating what looked like grassroots revolutions, to kind of disrupt the cultural fabric of a place. I wonder if there are examples within Rome that you could point to. But what do you think about the idea that this is a subverted sort of cultural manipulation to pit one wing against the other, so that out of the chaos, order could be birthed? That is a big fear of mine, and I wonder if that has shown itself in any of your research.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I have no idea. I mean, I try to talk to smart people and figure out what's going on today. But I can say about Rome that one of the distinctive features of the late Republic, which is a period that I am focusing on a lot in my show, is that you can kind of hire a mob to do something. You can hire a gang of thugs, but you can also kind of like pay a mob to show up and be, the people, clamoring against whatever, and make it kind of seem grassroots without it when it's actually on the kind of payroll of some oligarch. And great example of this is all the late Republic. This is happening in the kind of final years of the breakdown of the transition from Republic to Empire. We'll go into it a little bit, but in particular, the Catalinarian conspiracy is a really interesting kind of place to zoom in on some of how these patterns play out. So for just a little bit of background and kind of in a nutshell, what we're talking about. Rome is a collective government, right? They have consuls and praetors, elected officers. They have a people's assembly. They have a kind of aristocratic council, the Senate, and no one man runs the show. But after kind of debate when the actual point happens, is it 46 BC? Is it 31 BC? But basically, Julius Caesar gets himself involved in this huge civil war as a general of Rome, as one among many leaders of Rome. And by the end of it, he's kind of he's by far the most powerful man in Rome. Not clear that he wanted to establish a monarchy, but he might have been thinking that that was the solution to this kind of years of turmoil. And that's in the 40s BC. And then he gets assassinated, of course, famously. And then his adopted son, Octavian Augustus, becomes the first emperor by fighting some more civil wars. And that's this huge transition from, this kind of collective government that the American founders really looked to for how we should establish our own constitution, to this monarchy that is what Jesus was born under, right? Like the emperor, revered as a god, and Christian martyrs saying, no, I will not burn incense before the emperor. He's just a man. And they, get thrown to the lions. That world was very different from Caesar's world. And so one of the things that you have in the late Republic is this massive wealth inequality. And the top citizens of the oligarchy are getting huge troves of treasure from foreign wars. They're getting all kinds of political gifts given to them to plead the case of so-and-so provincial. They have all these clientele, just sweeping sources of like political influence and revenue all across this huge, really Mediterranean-wide empire. And then the poor people of Rome, or the average people even, are not getting a share of the cut. Even like the kind of upper classes, but not high, like upper middle, let's say, upper middle class versus the top tier. There's a massive chasm in power and influence. And so there's a lot of discontent about this inequality. And this man, Cataline, famously tried to stage a kind of coup, a revolution. This happened in 63 BC. And it failed. It got caught. And, Cataline ends up dying in battle. But very interestingly, the people that were thought to be behind Cataline's revolt. So Cataline is this indebted aristocrat. He's sort of down on his luck, doesn't have a lot of money or influence. But there were powerful backers behind him who did have the money and influence. One of them is Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome. And another one is, at least some people thought, Julius Caesar himself, a young Julius Caesar. He's sort of mid-30s at this point, kind of hasn't made his rise yet, hasn't fought any of his great wars, but people have got their eye on him. He's on his way. And people thought that Caesar and Crassus were kind of behind Cataline. So if Cataline had won his revolution or successfully orchestrated his coup, they might have Crassus and Caesar would be running the show with Cataline as their puppet, maybe. So it's this fascinating example of somebody seeing the discontent and the resentment, and much of it was justified too, worth saying, and trying to kind of have a bloody revolution, and then it getting suppressed by the forces of law and order. And you could even question whether the forces of law and order were the good guys in that situation. But it was a powder keg, and they managed to kind of put a lid on it in 63. But it's sort of those same forces of resentment, inequality, indebtedness that allow the final kind of turn 15 years later to a proper civil war that Caesar is on the populist side of, and provokes this transition from republic to empire.
It has slight January 6 vibes. I mean, it does really mimic the economic divide. And to not sound like a leftist, it's like you really got to like walk a line. But there is a huge economic divide between the upper 1% of people who are taking money, who are gaining profits from like Lockheed Martin. They're selling weapons to, you know, different countries, just profiting off of war as our young men go off and die for these wars, come back with nothing. And you look at the left, and I'm like, to be completely honest, I'm a little bit sympathetic with their arguments because, yeah, a lot of these people, they are nihilistic because they don't have a family. They never will. I mean, half of the dating pool is either crazy, tuned out
Oh my
on
God,
medicine. They'll never own a house. They'll never have, I mean, everything is stacked against them, and I get it.
So I'm saying they have nothing to conserve.
Yeah, it's like, why would I understand that, but it's also a trap that you're falling into. Like, they've been lied to by these people. Sam Hyde nailed it this morning with his video where he
I
said
saw a little bit of that.
yeah, he's
I
like,
didn't catch that.
oh yeah, go check it out.
It's intense, man, but you'd have a hard time arguing against it.
Yeah, he basically says that, you know, these people you've given up, you've been lied to, and you've given up your right to have children, to have this play. And it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff working against you, but if you've just outright admitted this and you've spoken it out loud and you've given up the fact that you can do that, then it's over.
Yeah.
So I just don't know where you go with
but that's like the way my mind always goes is like, who's benefiting off of this? When you go back to even the Black Lives Matter protests, which this feels like a direct...
that's another question I have. Like, this guy Crassus, you're saying he's like one of these upper tier people. What is his motive? It sounds a lot like a George Soros kind of thing.
That's what that's exactly where I was going.
Okay,
yeah. Crassus is sort of a bit like the Soros of Rome. I mean, because he's from a good family, but he not like a tip-top family. And there was an earlier civil war. I mean, so many civil wars in the late Republic in the 80s BC. So like 20 years before this incident, there were Crassus is a young man, and he manages to basically make a fortune buying and selling confiscated estates of enemies of the state. You know, he's like house flipping, but you know,
sounds like this is HGTV back in the day.
No, it sounds like Soros began his by selling out his own people. It's okay. Continue. I'm sorry.
So he builds this fortune, and he gets in a kind of arguably disrespectable way, and he does it because he's aligned with this dictator Sulla. But basically, what Crassus does is he builds this fortune not to just be a rich guy, but to use it to build a power network. And what he does is he lends money at very favorable rates to a lot of needy men who are not of the kind of top tier. He's like going after the B+ players, maybe these kind of outsiders, kind of upper middle class types, new men in the Senate. And he says, you know, Crassus is your man. I can help you kind of make your career. I've got a political machine. We can get your son a questorship. You know, you're going to be a made man if you go with Crassus. And so he has this huge swath of kind of like no name politicians, senators, but whose votes still count in the Senate. You know, so he can really move a huge block of kind of backbenchers in the Senate, and he knows everything that's going on in the city at all times because he's got this incredible network of people that owe him money, and he's like, oh no, you don't need to pay me back. Get to it next month. It's all right. You know, I got you. And so that's how he kind of keeps the chains on them. And you know, eventually he is.
Sounds like usury.
It does.
What was his ethnicity? I'm just
right. That's a weird question. That's a good.
Never mind. This is a Christian.
100% Italian. 100% Italian.
All right.
But well, the thing is, like, you know, usury in Rome is charging too much interest. But money lending was seen as disreputable. Importantly, it was not something that you were supposed to engage in as a senator. You actually formally barred from it. So, you know, he just basically, I don't know, he sets up a pot of money somewhere else, and he has somebody else do the actual lending, sign their actual name on the contract. I mean, there's ways to get around this stuff. So he's this kind of like shadowy puppet master. And one of the people that he promotes in his career is Julius Caesar. You know, he he is a huge financier of Caesar's very expensive career. Caesar's always throwing these lavish games to get popularity. He's going off and fighting wars that require a lot of funds, hire soldiers. And Crassus is basically, when Caesar's playbook is, he's a respectable noble, kind of a bit like you might say he's a bit like a Donald Trump, in that he's from the kind of, in the tabloid magazine classes of America, at least. And but he kind of sets himself against that establishment at some point. He kind of turns on them. And this is one of the reasons why they hate him so much, right? Because he was one of them, and he kind of betrayed the consensus and goes against them. And so essentially Crassus, when Caesar's doing that playbook, Crassus was doing the same thing. And that's why he built his political network, so he could kind of challenge the establishment aristocracy. I think that probably Caesar had better motives than Crassus, but Crassus was really out for power. And eventually it's Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey that form this triumvirate in the year 59 to kind of master the state, and to kind of, even though it's a republic in name, it's really like the rule of three men running the show in Rome. So, I forget what the kind of topic that we were discussing around Crassus was, but essentially he's gonna be playing the populist card on some level for all of his career. Crassus is a guy that can hire mobs to intimidate other politicians. He's famous for getting criminals acquitted.
Oh boy.
Who definitely had it coming, by bribing the jury. That's typically how you do that sort of thing. You could bribe witnesses, but there's always ways to kind of get people off of serious political charges. So, the influence of money in politics is this very age-old question, and Crassus is one of like supreme examples of that.
It sounds like the beginnings of what's that called? Operation Gladio, or Project Gladio, where it's like there's money inserted. There are mobs that are kind of like sicked on the public in order to create a reaction for what they desire afterward. Is that, would you draw that comparison as well?
Yeah. Well, there is, I'm trying to think of a specific example with Crassus. Like, one of the things that he supports this mobster at some point, who owed him a favor because Crassus got him acquitted. The guy was basically going to be executed, and Crassus paid off the jurors, and this guy, just starts running the streets with his thugs, and when he gets attacked by some of the more respectable politicians, he'll say that, oh, look, the aristocrats are trying to deprive the people of their desserts. This mobster, Clodius is his name, eventually gets himself elected to office, if you can believe that. And he passes a law to have a free grain dole to all of the Roman citizens. It's basically like welfare. He passes one of the early welfare laws. There's so much money, there's so many poor people in Rome. And whenever politicians attack this, he can get a group of people to pelt them with fruit as they're walking out of the Senate, and make them seem like cats, when really they're just trying to kind of hold the order together. So there's all kinds of ways to game the system like that.
Sounds very familiar, appealing to the disenfranchised with kind of freebies, and then mischaracterizing anybody who should stand up against those systems
while being funded by the guy who is part of this.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. Well, I mean, you're highlighting the importance of understanding history right now, which just brings us back to the original conversation about removing any interest in learning about history, because history was built by strong men who are toxic pieces of shit.
One of the things I think is interesting is how left and right are different in various periods of history. Like in the French Revolution, the revolutionaries were all like Rome obsessed Cicero nuts. They're all trying to be these great kind of republican figures standing against the monarchy. And there's this deep interest in history and in like Plutarch's biographies in particular, among the Robespierre and Danton. All these guys are like fancying themselves great men of the past, even though they're like the left, sometimes the hard left in France. And so I think that we're really at this new stage of leftism where erasure of history. I think you have to have Karl Marx for that to happen, to this like conspiracy that all of human history has been about, promoting the interests of the capitalists.
Yes.
That the cultural Marxist wave that comes later in the 30s with the Frankfurt School, this idea that the patriarchy, the colonial patriarchy is kind of been telling the narrative for all of these years, and they're trying to brainwash you. That's not really there even in the French Revolution. Maybe the seeds of it are there. It's certainly not there in the American Revolution, which you could also argue is a kind of left-wing energy. So yeah, I think that a lot of times people try to pick sides in history, and this is one of the great things about it, is it's difficult to pick sides. You have to think about the issue more objectively, like what does left right really mean? What does populist versus centralized or aristocrat really mean? So yeah, but I think we're in a different situation today.
Yeah, the titles change, the motives change, but the direction doesn't. It seems like the period of Rome that we were describing was a democracy that's sort of corrupt, falling apart, and then it turns into a monarchy. I've been actually like a couple of years ago thinking about and been sympathetic to the idea of monarchy, because I'm like, it just seems better. Seems like it makes more sense because there's one guy, and when he messes up, you can cut his head off. But there's also one guy at the top, and then when he declares himself God, this gets very messy too. Whereas democracy, what we have now, it's a God that has already failed. I mean, it's just falling apart on the edges everywhere. People still defending it. I'm just kind of like, but we're not going to vote our way out of this. They've cornered the system of and people's minds, and forget about. I'm wearing a shirt right now that says MK Ultra Dolphins. It's about John C. Lillian. If you want to get into conspiracy and MK Ultra and pharmaceuticals and how people's just like people are out of their minds, literally out of their minds. We cannot meaningfully have a democracy under these conditions. And
well, that's, not only the things that are in the food, if you want to get super conspiratorial, or the frequencies, but just the propaganda machine, the media in general, what it's been feeding people at scale. We're probably the most sedated populace in the history of the world. And we are plugged into the media like no other generation before us. And we're just being fed propaganda. Especially, I say that this is aimed predominantly at women and children, but more predominantly at women. If you...
they're the consumer market. They're doing like 80% of the purchases and making all these financial decisions. So that's who you're going to target. Then the next thing you do is appeal to their better nature, which is like, oh, don't you want things to be nice?
And that's that weaponized empathy thing I was talking about on Facebook, where they've taken things like empathy and tolerance and they've weaponized us or weaponized them against us. And it's like you are being made to be empathetic and tolerant to things that are corrosive to not only, your well-being, but your children's well-being. And so, yeah, a lot of this enters by way of women's media. I will say this very often. If you see anything, a show that's aimed at women, that's where you will get all your trans characters. That's where you're going to get your concepts like polyamory, right? Like this idea of having like multiple suitors or whatever. This is where you're going to get the idea of parents or any of these things. They don't exist in media for men.
Right.
And if they do, it's usually shouted about. They'll inject it in like somebody's, a superhero movie, a Marvel film, and mostly the audience that's aimed at are white men, 30 to 50, generally speaking, and they will get pretty upset if you put that in their movies, and then that movie will shit the bed.
We've gotten to the point where they're like,
well, now they're like,
they're just kind of like, oh, just let me, okay, like if I agree,
Can we get back to the fun?
Yeah.
Can we get back to the fun?
This segment brought to you by The Message. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I did see, and I wonder if you saw this, Alex. There was like a resurgence. There was a blip on the radar. It was in the past decade. Stoicism became very popular.
Right.
And I think it's since gone away. But like I have somewhere in my library of books that I rarely ever look at. I don't know if it's like Musings by Marcus Aurelius. Like there are these, there was this resurgence, a love for Stoicism, this desire to implement it. And I think it was maybe the infancy of people starting to get upset about what they were seeing and correctly identifying, some sort of solution, which was strong male figures. But then it went away. And I don't know why it went away. It seems like that ball would have kept going. Maybe I'm wrong. Did you see that, Alex? Did you see this? Was it within the past 10 years, this love for Stoicism came out? Stoicism. I've mispronounced it 17 times on this show.
I don't want to interrupt you.
You could have done it sooner.
No,
I would have appreciated it.
we let it go.
Unbelievable. Stoicism. Tell me about it.
I see Alex just sweating,
twitching every time I say it. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So, however you pronounce it, I think.
No, please. The right way is how you pronounce it. Stoicism.
Stoichiometry is no. So I think this is a good trend. It was, and I think it was for exactly the reasons you said, Dave. That like people felt this disconnection from the past. They wanted manly role models. Marcus Aurelius, great emperor, good man, strong. The meditations are, really
meditations.
They've changed a lot of lives. Yeah. Seneca is another. He's a great writer. He's the consigliere of Emperor Nero. Not quite as admirable a character in his personal life. Not a bad guy, but a better writer than Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus, famously the slave who gets freed eventually, this like slave philosopher, and showing you that no matter what, you have the choice to be virtuous and to be free, even if you are a slave. I mean, there's a lot of really good lessons in these authors, and I think that my sense is that this took off for the reasons you said. People are kind of grasping for some kind of depth, and then it's sort of run its course for two reasons. One of them is, when I was in my early 20s, I got into Stoicism, and I'm like, this is it. This is like, it's so simple. This is so useful. There's so many maxims. Focus on what you can control, not what you can't. Cosmic order. Like, there's a lot of good stuff. But Stoicism, after a while, I think most people who are kind of high openness get a little bored with it, because there's only so much depth you can go into. There's like these three big authors, their metaphysical system, their account of like the universe is a little weird, and the universe is consumed in fire every 5,000 years or something. You kind of hit the bottom of it sort of soon. And
there were other things that kind of padded that, right? Like at the same time, we got 12 Rules for Life from Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
The Rings of Power, I think was also made, was like 5 Rings of Power or something like that. And then there was also the Art of War. So like there was a bunch of, this resurgence, and it was men looking for direction and scaffolding. And then maybe it was just too dry. It wasn't enough. There needed to be something else on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'll get to what I propose as a solution in a second. But I think that the other aspect of this is that it kind of got domesticated. It sort of got turned into a squishy self-help meme that didn't really demand a lot of you at the end of the day. It didn't really demand you could keep doing your Lambo hustle, or you could keep doing your kind of boring desk job, and hey, Stoicism is for women too. Hey, if you're a mom, you can be a mom Stoic, and it gets so kind of pop Buddhismified,
Yeah.
that men sort of start to lose interest. Like it's not really calling me to some higher
Yeah,
life.
it's like, okay, once I refined myself by way of these rules or these laws or what have you, then what?
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Exactly. And I think that Plutarch is a great solution practically, because, if you've gotten enough into Rome, the best place to start, like, going deep, is familiarizing yourselves with the great men of Rome and Greece. And Plutarch's Lives, this great classic it was the most popular ancient book, one of the most, like, top 5 most popular books of all in the 18th century in America. It's hugely popular among the founding fathers. It's great examples of, people resisting tyrants, launching coups, fighting battles, dying honorably, all this stuff.
Mhm.
One of the characters of Plutarch's Lives that was really influential is Cato the Younger, who's Rome's greatest Stoic, I would say. He didn't write anything that we have today, but he sort of cited his Stoicism, or at least Stoicism was kind of part of his, public presence, self-presentation in his resistance to Julius Caesar, his defense of the Republic. So, I mean, these lives are just so much more textured and give you, like we were talking about, that scaffolding of archetypes. Like, what should you be striving for? Okay,
Sure.
what should you put your Stoic principles in the service of? I think that Plutarch gives you a lot of data points for that. One other philosopher that I really like, who is not a great read, I have to admit, but very smart and influential, is Aristotle.
Hmm.
And if you pick up Aristotle's Ethics and you skip to book 4, I think it's right at the beginning of book 4, towards the beginning, he talks about this quintessential virtue of greatness, which is greatness of soul. And megalopsychia is the Greek word. Great. It's sometimes called greatness of mind, magnanimity, but it's this idea that, or it's a virtue that you can cultivate, where you desire great things, consider yourself worthy of them, and are correct in that judgment. So
Hmm.
it's like good ambition. It's the highest form of ambition, and you're correct in your judgment that you deserve great things because you are actually virtuous. So it means you desire to be worthy of the esteem of your fellow men. And this is like Abraham Lincoln. This is George Washington. This is so many of our great leaders. You aspire to, like, well, to honor, is what Aristotle says, to, like, leadership, in the service of something good, and that requires you to be to merit the esteem of your fellow men. And I think this is something that a lot of Plutarch's heroes exhibit, and that's why the founding fathers like George Washington were obsessed with Cato, and John Adams is obsessed with Cicero. He's obsessed with Epaminondas of Thebes, another great kind of democratic leader, really brave man. So I think that's where I think we should go after the Stoicism thing has run its course. Like, you can still be a Stoic and then admire these guys and add something on top of it.
It's interesting because there's no place to go after the Stoicism, and what you're saying is a good direction, but it was in response to this subversion, this ideological subversion of America. And after you armed yourself with the tenets of Stoicism, there was no battle to fight, because
Right.
the nature of the subversion was one that only took place in dialogue, and then they managed to effectively shut that dialogue down. Right. So the dialogue was no longer taking place in the town square, but it's taking place on the internet, where the censorship moderators can remove you from the conversation entirely. So the Stoicism should lead you almost to the public square of dialogue, right? To now express these ideas and these values, but then you're being turned off. You can't even express them. There's trigger words that'll, the algorithm will notice you, and you will get your account banned, or you will get. So now the public square is unfairly moderated, and it's leaning in one direction. So it snuffs out the flame that's been ignited by the Stoicism. There's no outlet for it, and you can't go directly to combat if there is no public square. Meaning, in the public square where the dialogue used to happen, if the dialogue couldn't be reconciled, then actual, you know, combat of some sort would take place, right? And this would like snowball into an actual war or a civil war. Now there is no dialogue.
Do you think that's why there's been a concerted effort? I mean, we'll talk about like white men. There's been a concerted effort to spike the idea of being white. People are not supposed to be proud of it. And then that gets mixed up with white pride. And, you know, obviously there are extremes of this, but we have a generation of people who are, I think that they were or are still ashamed of either their skin color or what people have told them what they are and their fathers and their family
They
are.
call them monsters and conquerors and racists and homophobes. And
Right. But now there's a movement in the other direction, which is kind of like these ideas of Aristotle. But I'm also careful with, like, even with myself, with that idea of like, what do I deserve as a man? Because I know when I was younger, I might have thought I did not, you know, I was like, man, who am I to deserve this thing? And guess what? You're not going to get that thing because you've already told yourself, like, I don't deserve this, therefore I will not work for it.
I'm
but then
unworthy of it.
Older, I said, no, I deserve the nice things. Like I work for this stuff. I know who I am. And then you kind of, it's weird. You manifest, you get those nice things, but there is also a slippery slope of I deserve, I am, therefore, and then your ego, like you've got to check. And
it's almost a question, right? If you suppress that in a let's say a race like the white race enough, could you theoretically create the sentiment of supremacy as a disproportionate snapback from
yes, and this is what I struggled with recently, where it's like, and you've seen it, where I'm like, I got to dial it back because I'm like, I have with things that I've created, and then people who have you know, kind of wronged me. In a sense, I was very humble within dealing with them, but then the reality was, wait a second, I created that. I created the thing that you're using now for success, but I never threw it in your face. But I also have to realize that I created that thing. And then the slippery slope is me. Right? I, and we can go crazy with that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to go there. And it seems like it could be where we're headed. Is that a concern? Does that resonate with what you're saying there?
Yeah, totally. And it's certainly something Aristotle's concerned with. It's interesting because so one of the ways that he just kind of refines this concept of greatness of soul is to distinguish it. All of his virtues are kind of means between two extremes. So like courage is this mean between the extreme of cowardice on the one hand and like rashness on the other hand. And so greatness of soul is a mean between vanity on the one hand and then what he calls smallness of soul, which we might say is humility, but I think actually real humility, even like Christian humility, is about knowing fully who you are. And when you look at yourself in relation to the omnipotent God, you realize you're less than a worm. But you should also realize where you stand in relation to your fellow men, and that all good things come from God. But you know, you might actually deserve that job more than the other guy, and to recognize that is not contradict humility. And so I think that greatness of soul can kind of actually probably should coexist with humility in that sense of like knowing who you are, like having a really accurate opinion of your own capabilities and your own achievements and your own virtue, which people tend to overestimate, yes, on the vanity end, but people also tend to underestimate it. And I think that actually the characteristic vice of our day has a lot to do with exactly what you were talking about, that people, you know, especially the sort of like white, especially males, probably especially white males, have been told you're bad. Look at all the things you did throughout history. You oppressed all those poor women and the colonials, and so, you know, we're taught to kind of lead with this modesty or this humility or false humility even. And Aristotle says actually false humility or what he calls smallness of soul is worse than vanity.
I
Because
think so.
vanity, you can actually like put somebody like that to use, The small
Yes.
of soul is is further away from greatness of soul, and it's kind of useless
But that's
to other people.
That vanity is what allows the archetype of the fool to become the hero, right? Because it's like the foolishness to think that you can go out and do this
You
thing.
might stumble upon something great.
Yeah, but whereas if you had smallness of soul to too much of a degree, then you wouldn't go out and meet the challenge. You kind of need to be a fool to go out and meet the challenge, roll that dice, and then potentially become somebody that overcomes and is renowned, right? Becomes the hero. So yeah, without that, if everybody is moving around with, you know, smallness of soul, then nobody is going and fighting the monster. Nobody fights the dragon, nobody overcomes the dragon, and then we all just remain under its, you know, under its what do they
claw.
got? Its claw.
Yeah.
Its feet.
Yeah, and at least vanity, there's like some clay on the table you can work with. Like you can mold that into a proper kind of desire for I should actually deserve this. Like somebody that person can have a conscience and say, all right, I got to actually earn this, and they can learn from their mistakes, right? You get punched in the face when you go too far, and maybe you can actually become great. But without even trying, you know, you're never going to get there.
Where do you I mean, do you see we're in a weird place. We just had the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We have this boiling point, it seems, that we've reached, and given all of your historical context, a lot of people will look at, we were talking earlier before the show started, there was that meme, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And I would put a little caveat on that, and I say most people, if they are thinking about the fall of Rome as it applies to the you know, the American Empire. I think that has probably been the droning thing that's been on people's mind.
But not, I mean, throughout this conversation, the parallels, and not just this conversation, but ones we've had with Jeremy Ryan Slate, and, you know, just thought about previously, the correlation and between Donald Trump and Caesar.
That's an interesting one.
It's like this idea of the populist movement. I think even the left nails it with, like, years ago when they did their play of Donald Trump being assassinated the way Caesar was. It's almost an admission of what they're seeing and what's being played out.
And I was telling you about that whole correlation. It's like the first emperor of Rome ushered in what was
the golden
age, and Trump is talking about this golden age, and then he just happens to be the first sitting president at Caesar's Superdome. I thought it was fun. He's the first president at a Super Bowl. So there's a lot of weird kind of like themes. These themes, and given the arc of history, it does seem that history has a tendency to rhyme. And so I mean, where do you put us in comparison? Do you have a lot of optimism about the direction that America is headed, especially given recent events? Or is history teaching you maybe to be more cautious with that optimism?
Yeah, well, it can always blow up in your face. I tend to be an inveterate optimist by disposition, but I do think that we, you know, like if you ask people in Britain, we've got it better. We're like the last hope.
Britain just had that, like, there's like millions of people marching in the streets of England right now. And it's fascinating to watch that unfold as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that they're kind of looking to us to lead the way. And it's funny how the cultural direction is sort of switched across the Atlantic. But so the reasons for optimism don't necessarily involve a civil war like they do in Caesar's case. I think they don't, and they shouldn't. But if you look at Trump versus Caesar, some interesting parallels include, you know, Caesar is a populist. He is building his constituency with the have-nots, not necessarily the dirt poor. You can only do so much with the dirt poor, but it's with the kind of competent, you know, just middle class sons can be soldiers, go fight for Caesar. The middle to upper middle class versus the super elites, and he's building a really wide power base. So one of the things that he does is to foster his rise that is sort of un-Trump like is he he goes and he wages this great campaign in France, and he conquers basically all of France for Rome. The Gauls were this, tribal people that had occasionally invaded Italy, and they actually sacked Rome 300 years before Caesar's day. So they were a real formidable force, and Caesar found some excuse that they were pushing some ally of Rome around, and he kind of goes in there and he fights a battle, establishes the beachhead, and kind of it works out from there to kind of gradually conquer the place and make it seem almost like an accident, as the Romans love to do in their conquests. They're just like, defending the interests of their friends on every separate occasion. But it's an incredible achievement, and a lot of lives lost, of course. But the Gauls love to fight battles just as much as the Romans, so it was a fair game, I think, to put it bluntly. But the what this did for Caesar is it gave him this power base of people that respected him and saw his competence, and it kind of made a name for him. And I think Trump's rise was very different. Of course, you have the real estate empire, and he's already kind of a celebrity in New York even before he starts The Apprentice, which just becomes this incredible kind of training ground for him to develop that like camera readiness and the kind of meme power that he has, the kind of quick-witted Twitter game that he's got. So much of his like public persona that he had
it's kind of way sense, huh? What the heck?
Is that, you mean like, where is it now?
It's kind of washed. I mean, he is 80, so
it's the sword's gotten a little dull. But I think that illustrates that. So Caesar's an anti-establishment figure. That's you could argue that's kind of leftward, and Caesar's an heir of the Gracchi, who are these great populists who wanted to redistribute land, not to the dirt poor again, but to the kind of left out middle classes. And that's a lot of what Trump has been doing, and so it's a lot of what Caesar did. There's some interesting differences. So Caesar was an advocate of granting more citizenship to these certain loyal provincials, people in Italy, in like northern Italy, that had not had Roman citizenship but had fought in his wars. He wanted to expand citizenship to them, but it wasn't about flooding Rome with kind of dependent clients that would be social program spongers for the rest of their lives, and like permanent political clients of the party. But they were people that were kind of from the upper classes, and so I think the immigration or the citizenship issue is like plays out really differently in Rome. But the way that he ended up as the first man in Rome is because the oligarchy refused to accept him as a legitimate deserver of his honors. Like his enemies, especially Cato, he's off in Gaul fighting this incredibly terrifically difficult war, and he wants to come back and get the honor that he deserves from Rome. He wants a triumph, big triumphal procession, and he wants to run for consul again in absentia. And we don't need to get into the constitutional details, but basically his enemies and his former friend Pompey say, no, you can't come back to Rome unless you basically lay down all of your armies and put yourself at the mercy of the current government. And Caesar said, well, essentially you're asking me to give to concede all of the dignity that I earned from my conquests, and you're punking me, and that's unjust. And I think that was like a really legitimate claim. I mean, was it worth fighting a civil war over? Many people would say no. Caesar thought it was, but he at the same time, he didn't want to fight a civil war. I think that's really important to emphasize, that people don't believe him when he says that, but there's so much evidence. He tried everything he could not to fight a civil war, to de-escalate the situation. Once it had started, he invades Italy, he crosses the Rubicon. Once it starts, he's like, all right, I crossed the red line to show you that I'm serious. I'm serious, but come on, it doesn't have to go this way. He tries it again and again and again, but he's not willing to essentially allow himself to become, it's like political suicide to concede to their demands. It's like, you will never hold office in this town again, Caesar, for all of the bad things you did 10 years ago. He had some indiscretions in his past that weren't crimes. They were, political pushing of the envelope. They just want him,
grab him by the pussy stuff, huh?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And the sort of thing that, I mean, it's comparable to the way that, if Trump had lost in 2024, they would have hounded him in the courts until he was, a negative net worth of $1 billion, right? So there's something similar. I think that we were at a kind of similar crisis point, possibly, like if the election had been stolen. Not that it ever was stolen. I don't know. But
no, YouTube, we're not saying that.
We're
totally
not
was,
that.
but yeah.
But we could have faced a really similar crisis, and I think that we dodged it by the efforts of a guy like Charlie Kirk, frankly, right? So there, since that happened, I think there's hope that we can reform things internally, but we have a lot more working against us than the Romans did, because we have, these civil conflicts tend to just eat away at the bonds of trust and culture already. But we've just been spending the past half of a century telling people they don't need to read history, telling people that the basic social institutions that have been around for millennia are corrupt and need to be rejected, marriage and children and gender and all this stuff.
I almost feel
like a lot of rebuilding to do.
I feel like we could do a lot of that rebuilding if we gave men back their spaces, and we eliminated these sort of party line, ideological lines that separate us and keep us from talking. Honestly, and I know it sounds, because it's a kind of comedic bent to it, get women out of the room, get these guys together. And I mean, like, the thin armed men with the ponytails that are blue, as well as military vet, get them in the same room and get them exchanging these ideas. Like, there needs to be a dialogue. The dialogue was kept from being, had for a long time, like I said, by these moderators. The public spaces, the public dialogue spaces, the town squares cannot be digital exclusively. They need to be physical rooms where we can sit down and share these ideas, and it needs to happen repeatedly until we can come to some sort of a general agreement where these bad ideas can go to die and good ideas can rise to the top. This sort of civil war thing is inevitable if we don't have spaces like the ones that were subverted, that you were a part of previously and now are continuing to do. But
Alex, do you think that 2024, by taking the reins of political power, do you think that was enough? Because at the time, I don't want to sound like I guess I don't care if I sound like a political extremist, but I saw it and I said, yeah, that's the only way for this to go. Because if the right wing does not take back power, the left is playing for keeps here. I feel like we're at a point where if you, as the right wing of politics, if you do not take power decisively for the time being,
a generation, maybe it takes a while, right?
Dude, yeah,
I program people.
And it's a lot more difficult than Rome, because we have the apparatus that we're using now, which I firmly believe, like the MK Ultra program, this form of mind control, this soft form of mind control through psychedelics, through medicine, through whatever you want to call it, through programming, television. It is, I mean, man, it is ingrained in our culture, and it's not fair to even hold an election and tell these people to make a conscious decision. But the point is that, Donald Trump wins this election for another 4 years. You have control. He's still battling within and I don't even really know his true intention, but is that far enough to avoid a civil war? Because it seems like that quelled it for a time, where you can kind of hold this together, and it's like, it's not easy to hold this thing. It's struggling. But then we have another
we got another
years,
election cycle coming up.
As a matter of fact, by 2026, like, these issues that we should be dealing with are going to be off the table, and it's just going to be, how could I get elected for the next time, or how could my JD Vance get elected for the next? And I'm like, what a waste! Like, we are in
goes too fast.
We're in the throes of turmoil, and realistically, you have a year and a half to fix this before you have to start campaigning for the next one. It's insanity.
It is insanity.
It's why I'm like, you start looking at monarchy, and he was like, yeah, I get,
it takes a long time.
At what point did Julius Caesar decide, like, he's like, I don't want to do this civil war thing, but like, we're going to do this? Like, was there a deciding factor? Because I'm looking at like what it may be here.
Yeah. Well, just to go on to your earlier point, it occurred to me that one of the problems we have is this managerial bureaucracy, which tends to be very feminine in the way that it works. These like large bureaucratic institutions, kind of like feminine qualities,
HR.
often.
HR,
the HR office, and also just like what the ancients would look at it is kind of like the rule of eunuchs. These the kind of cadre of bureaucrats and courtiers, many of whom get castrated on purpose, because that means that they can inhabit the bureaucracy without ever having the hope of rising to the top, because nobody wants to be the subject of a eunuch, and then the eunuchs know that, and so they're just going to kind of like operate behind the scenes. So
that's a wild decision to make. Like, this is what I want to do.
It's not a wild decision. I mean, you
cut
see
it off.
You see it with I mean, at the smallest level, it's like the skinny college dude that's around all the women, and he has he's castrated himself in order to kind of like stay behind the scenes. He's like, maybe I'll get a crumb. It's like, that's another archetype that we haven't mentioned today, but I guess here we go.
The male feminist.
As many bad ones as there are good ones. But the Romans were really suspicious of permanent bureaucracies. So they don't have like a department of like, what's the word, procurement. They don't have like a military supply office. They just have private contractors do everything, because if you have like a department of an IRS, they don't have an IRS. They have private contractors doing all of that. The state sets up these contracts. All right, we need taxes from the province of Asia, and then a couple of companies come together and they're like, all right, we think that we can get you 10 million sesterces this year. And Rome, and the other companies like, well, we think we can get you 12 million. And so the state's like, all right, 12 million. They've got the more credible, they've got a good team, we trust them. And then those guys go and they go collect 15 million, and they keep 3 million for themselves, right? These are the publicans that are criticized in the Gospels. And there's all these ways that they just contract this stuff out. This causes problems. I'm not saying that we should do that, but they sensed that if you have a permanent bureaucracy in any realm, that eventually becomes a power center that is not subject to kind of Republican churn of offices and kind of voter pressure and the political process. I think this is a really big issue that we have to solve here. And I was just in DC recently, and I had some friends, some listeners of my show in the administration, and it's like they understand the problem, at least, I think. So that gives me some hope. But it's the Doge thing. I mean, it's really hard, right? It was tried during Reagan, and we've just scratched the surface. But
we're struggling at both ends, though. I mean, we have public entities controlling the government as well, as well as government entities controlling the government without any kind of recompense. So we're like, you're going to talk about Rome, we're in a lot of trouble.
How much of this is our fault, right? We're talking about men and strong leaders being the solution. And Hicktown Honey is one of the supporters of the show. She said something, if you scroll up a little bit, she said, no, it's higher up. It would be nice if y'all would have shut down losers' ideas immediately rather than I want to them through the computer. So what she's saying here is like, this idea of strong men,
Right.
how much of it falls on the shoulders of the strong men who came before, when this ideology started to take a stranglehold, I was a kid.
The problem is, though, you do need that push and pull of the liberal ideology versus the conservative ideology, because one will consistently go too far. And we've been talking a lot on this show about we're watching the conservative or the right wing. We're like, that's going to go too far.
Right. But
and I want it to go, but I'm just like, that's just naturally going to go too far.
But there was a time when there were voices that should have been piping up, because a lot of us said this is a decade, 2 decades ago, even back when they were telling men that they need to be more in touch with their feminine side and that it's okay for men to cry. Like that was kind of like the getting the foot in the door, the feminization of men was happening. And I guess we didn't have, hindsight is 2020, but there were not enough influential voices standing up and going, no, we don't need to do that. And, I guess it would have taken somebody with incredible foresight about slippery slopes.
Somebody just has read a couple of books.
Right. Maybe somebody that understood a little bit of history. But how much of this falls on, it almost feels like it all falls on the shoulders of strong men who should have put a stop to this.
That's what I think. I mean, it's the feminization of culture is about the feminization of men. Ultimately, it's about men kind of, ceding the responsibility. I think a lot of it is kind of contemptible self-interest, and I'm let he who is without sin cast the first stone. But I get it because like if you're kind of anti-patriarchy as a man in the 90s or the aughts, like there's hot girls in that Feminism 101 class, right?
Back when they were actually still hot. Now they're all
then there really were. I trust me.
He's like, I swear, dude, I swear there were.
So, and I think that pattern kind of plays out in the corporate offices where being an ally or whatever, this can kind of, it gets you these like short-term kind of honeypot benefits. And and it gets you public acclaim and the newscasters and the whole kind of system. The ideology was there, maybe despite it was already kind of percolating through in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But then it took men in positions of authority to capitalize on it and say, oh, I can become more popular. I can whatever it is, get richer or have more dates if I concede to this, even though it's kind of questionable. That short-term thinking is precisely, I think, where the problem lies, is like men of responsibility not really thinking about their grandchildren. But
this is what happened.
They're talking about boomers.
Well, Woodrow Wilson is like, I mean, I hate the guy, and this actually stems almost directly from him. When I think women's suffrage was 1919, and at first he opposed it. He's like, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? We're gonna let these guys vote. And then he turned to realize that, oh, I have a really huge voter base here that I can push a lot of progressive policies with. And then within a year, he's a supporter of it, and then it gets passed, and it's like, oh, so you've just used this as opportunity, and now the country's ruined again. Among creating the Federal Reserve and a couple of other things, it's like, man,
this is weak men create hard times. Weak, unprincipled men create hard times. And if you look at it now, it's very clear that the female voter base is the direct recipient of the emotional leverage. As I posted something on Facebook that said, the porous southern border, the migrant crisis that we have, was facilitated by low information, high emotion voters, which are predominantly women, because they are the ones who are subjected to appeals to emotion. And that's what we saw rampantly.
Look at the map. Just look at the voter map. If you remove, specifically college educated female voters, it's like dark red. Not to say that
blood red.
Yeah, not to say that obviously like Trump's policies are all 100% correct, but it's like it's way more correct than the opposition. So it's
And it's
fairly
like,
obvious.
you know, my alarms go off whenever the media is manipulating you emotionally, or at least seeks to. I that repels me. I pull in the opposite direction of that. But that is the modality by which most of the detrimental legislation gets passed. It is emotional manipulation, and then you're forced to ask, well, if it's not me, if I see when you're trying to manipulate me emotionally, like I hate the idea of school shootings, but every time something happens, you use the children to try to, you know, take away our guns or something like that. And I go, I'm not going to be manipulated. Who's that working on?
Mm-hmm.
It's working on women.
I see this in my boomer mom, which I hope she's not listening. I know she would not listen to something like this, but you know, it's really terrible for them. And yet it's not so easy to roll back, because if you think about it, like there are a lot of really high talent, high character, respectable women that all right, my wife, for example, and the wives of many of my friends, like strong, you know, good values, mothers, you know, serious people. And then are they going to vote? And this like who's a man, or are they not going to vote? And this like
offset them.
IQ, leftist, whatever, is going to vote. It's not so easy to solve in that way, but I think it really does. It damages them, because they're like the eye of Sauron, of propaganda. Sauron is like on them, because it's
on them. And the only remedy I think we need to bring back is women. all right, fine. That's too far. But no, there is. It's so obvious to me. You just put it perfectly. The eye of Sauron, the most sophisticated propaganda machine in the history of humanity, is aimed at women.
It's a crazy thing too. With my wife, she's very much the same way. She's like sensible. As a matter of fact, if she didn't understand what I was like, because I'm constantly telling her, I'm like, look at this. If she didn't understand the propaganda, she would probably just omit like voting, or omit even understanding politics at all. Because like she's like, I'm worried about my kids. And it's like, well, that's your archetypal role. Like you've embodied that correctly.
Yeah.
The problem is that we've asked you now to go out and do more. But with her, there's a thing that I sense constantly where I'm like, if I don't like continue to red pill her, if I just like let her go,
it would. You got to keep reeling them back in.
No, but because the Eye of Sauron is completely on them.
Yes, it
and
is.
It's hard to resist if you're being bombarded with this nonsense. Where after a while, you're like,
that's you, right? But I mean, like you've cut yourself out, property here, and you've got your family unit together, and you're really focused on that. Most people are drowning in debt. Most people have they make not enough money, so both parents have to go out into the workforce, which means the state is raising your child, right? And so most family units are dispersed.
Most people will tell you politics is not important, and I agree in a sense. But then when you look at because the politics is paying attention to you right now, and it's moving you,
it's
and
aimed at you.
It's aimed at culture, and it's gonna touch you. So if you're not paying attention to it, it's gonna ruin your family. And in 2020, I know a bunch of people who like either they're divorced or they have disaffected marriages now, just with one thing that happened there, one major difference that was never spoken about, an ideological framework that was never fleshed out within their marriage, ripped it apart. And it's like, well, you're not playing your roles, and it's hard to say these things to people. Because it's hurtful. It's like I had a conversation. But in some ways,
it's like it's hard to say them, and the longer we wait, the harder it gets. And we should have been saying this 10 years ago.
Well, I don't know if I'm even doing the right thing, but I had a conversation with my daughter at 7 years old about the WNBA, and she's 7 years old, and I'm like, I have to explain the economic ramifications of when you insert. Man, it's crazy. Why the do I got to explain this to a little kid? But I'm like, hey, that's actually, this is propped up and funded by the NBA, a place that people pay for. So these women are now performing and dedicating their lives to a sport that
doesn't exist without.
They don't really want to see it. And now I'm the bad guy because I'm like, but I'm not the guy I'm not buying the tickets either. But nobody is.
Everybody gets mad at me when I buy a ticket and I show up and I throw it on the court. And
I just don't want.
The bad guy.
I don't want my family or my friends or the people I'm talking to take part in the delusion, because it is a delusion. It's an economic delusion saying like there's a viable market for this. It's like there is not. There is not. If it was just on them to, you know, rent these stadiums and broadcast it, it wouldn't exist, because there is no market response for this. But the delusion is there, and then people take that and they snowball that, and God knows where that leads if you let them buy into that one delusion. And my daughter's like, you know, I go, this is actually not good. And she's like, well, I'm a girl. And I was like, I know, but let's sit down. I got to explain this to you. This is going to be hard. But it's like, this is the times we're living in. And if you let people get away with it, then you eventually you look back, you lose your family. And it's like, where are we at?
So I think all of that is to ask, like, how hard should we be them? Like really hard, or just a little hard, like open hand or closed hand? I don't know what the rules are anymore.
With logic, with facts and logic, right?
All right.
With rhetoric. With rhetoric, that's how you change people's minds.
Well, you know, your example with your wife Lobsta is, it's like, you know, now we have their natural inclination. The natural inclination of most women, if they have kids, is to like raise their kids, like be good mothers. But now there's an ideological incentive for somebody to come along and say, oh, you know, is that what your husband tells you you're good for? Is that all you're good for?
You hit her too.
Tell you that? Yeah.
No, you point out that person is a single mother.
There you go. I was just gonna point out that's why she's single.
It's happened many times. And if I'm not to brag about myself, but I have some self-worth. If I wasn't good at what I do, yeah, my wife could fall subject to that propaganda. But I'm like, hold on a second. I hear what she's saying, but all of her relationships have never worked out. So let's talk about that. And then you just move that. Like, that's rhetoric, right?
Yeah. Then just look at the fruits. Look at the fruits of their life. Yeah.
But it creates this weird incentive for women to like pay attention to politics a lot, and
because they're more susceptible to social pressures.
Yeah, but it's interesting. The women's suffrage 1920 Toastmasters is founded resolutely as an all-male group in 1924. It's like not too long after that. I wonder if there's a correlation there.
Is a response to it?
It's a kind of response. It's like a haven for men to come and like discuss politics and in this older way. And, you know, we used to have these institutions like the Lyceum Club. This is, you know, one of these debate clubs. Lincoln gave his first speech that kind of put him on the map. This famous speech of the Lyceum Club. We used to have like the Leather Apron Club that Ben Franklin founded. You know, that I think it turned into the American Philosophical Society, and all of these like institutions where men would get together and, like you were saying, you know, have to kind of defend their arguments in front of other men. And, you know, if you make a kind of a habit of snide remarks and carping, you know, eventually people are gonna either, you know, ask you to not come again, or they're gonna like physically beat you up. And that we've lost that sense of, all right, you have to restrain yourself and you have to actually think through your position. And
it goes to show you, like,
because that's the
IRL
proximity, right?
Well, the IRL stuff is very important.
It's important
when someone's next to you. You're like, I disagree with you. Here's why, but I have to navigate it in a way where you don't want to punch me.
Yeah,
because but that's also
within proximity of being punched. The Illuminati did a great job. They were like, no women, and then they took over the world. See, that's how much men can get done if they don't allow women into their spaces. They can go, we can conquer the world. Conquer the world.
Masons.
Yeah, the Masons, exactly. Well, you know, we look at these groups as nefarious, but you know, the only way you even get to be nefarious is if you don't have women involved.
I think you know, it has to start early. You know, I think especially middle school up, really, we need to start really making this an option that's available, at least an option that's available to like send your kids to an all boys school. There should be all boys public schools. I think there are a few of these. I have some friends working on this, but you know, there's a reason that they're not, because look at who controls the Department of Education and the kind of educational apparatus, and they know the effect that having a mixed gender formation will have. I mean, it's just really, you don't develop those strong friendships. You know, your men don't want to compete against women; they want to compete for women, right?
Dude, I have been in gyms where they've incorporated. You know, we've had women, and it's been like so confusing because I'm here to you.
I've sparred with women too.
I have sparred with women, and it's like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do?
Then they hit you, and you're like,
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
Like she actually hit me pretty good.
Yeah. Now I gotta go beat your husband up. Well, listen, we're coming up on the hour 50 mark. We have another show to do in a little bit. This has been a wonderful conversation. I don't know if we should. I think we did a pretty good job of almost blackpilling people a little bit. You know, just given the way that history goes and where we are now. Before we wrap it up, do you have any hope for these things? I know you said you're optimistic. Could men's groups be an answer forward? Do you see a way forward?
I think they're the answer, honestly. And I've got my own that I'm kind of firing up. I have other friends that are firing up other stuff. There's stuff out there. You get together in person with other men, and while you're at it, study the greats together. Like listen to my Life of Julius Caesar if you piqued your interest, or the Life of Cato. And I mean, there's all kinds of paradigms to get into and to discuss with your friends, and have a beer together, or have no beer and just like meet strictly for the purpose of like men's fellowship. We just totally lost that culture, and we really need to bring it back.
That's interesting. If we start doing that, people would say but we should do that.
It's a psyop. That's why that kind of came on. What do you? They know exactly how to kind of pry us. That's a powerful lever. And you got to.
And they're only showing us the ones that are.
I think that's why
they scream in each other's faces, right? And they hug in puddles and stuff. Yeah.
But the people who do like that, there is something that's strange about dudes where they'll be like, "What are you?" And then you'd be like, I don't know, you like slap your friend in the ass, be like, "Yeah." It's like there's something very manly about like almost the inversion of that. It's like, all right, now let's talk about Julius Caesar.
So butt cheeks. Well, all right, let's show off the website where people can find resources.
Oh wait, we have one more question.
Oh, that's right.
Very important question.
Maybe the most important question. I get caught up in it. Alex, this is something that we ask everybody at the close of the show, and we always get fascinating answers. Are you having fun?
I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. I'm not also, you mean like now I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. In life, I mean like
in your pursuits and the things that you're doing, what you are geared towards.
It's stressful. I feel like I can never stop working, but I couldn't possibly be doing anything else if I had the choice. I'm having fun, I gotta say.
That's awesome, man.
You guys seem like you're having fun too.
We are. We got one black pill response recently where the guest was like, "Fun?
What do you mean?
What do you mean? Fun?
He got mad at us and he's like, "I gotta go."
State of things, and then he was like, I have to go now, and I was like, "That's crazy." But mostly,
we're gonna bring him around though.
We're gonna bring him around. You know what it is though, Alex?
Was he Russian? The Russians hate.
No, he wasn't Russian. He was just looking deep into the abyss.
Yeah.
But we talk to people who are pursuing a thing that drives them, and I think that that's the key. If you're pursuing what you think that you're meant to be doing, then you're having fun. And so in that sentiment, we're also having fun. Let's show off the website. Alex, tell everybody where they can go to get a gander at your work.
Costofglory.com is my website. I'm on Spotify, Cost of Glory, Apple Podcasts, also on YouTube. We started putting some documentary videos together over the audio at Cost of Glory on X. So pretty easy to find. Check it out.
Very cool. Cool. I just threw you a follow, man. Guys, go follow him. More masculine, great work. Alex, thank you again for coming on the show. And we'll wrap it up, right? Anything else to say? Final words.
Men's groups aren't, unless they're unless they're actually, because those exist too, but don't scrutinize them. Make sure you know what they're about.
All right, guys. Until next time, don't forget to obey, submit, and comply.
On planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture.